this one was a bit rushed because we heard Taylor is coming, so we were like, hey, let's do something. So a bit about us. I'm the main organizer. Marcus is helping me as community contributor, and Nick, Daniel, Chime, and Ricky are helping us with the event. They are our Microsoft hosts and contributors, or our lovely friends. And Taylor is gonna do a demonstration or talk. He's gonna cover some nice, cool stuff about modernization, which I think a lot of companies need these days. Hopefully, we can get some good questions from today. But before that, I'm gonna pass this. A bit of housekeeping. So, code of conduct: please be nice to each other. Be gentleman, gentlewoman. Yeah. So about facilities. So we are in this room, and these are the coffee machines. So this one is where we ate the pizza and destroyed those pizzas and drinks. That's also where you can find the rubbish and recycling and everything that you need. These are around the back of the lobby for the first aid kit and fire extinguisher. One of the good side of this meetup, I start successfully saying extinguisher. Maybe I'm not doing it good. So these are the toilets located next to the elevator on the both sides of the elevator. But there's a tricky part. So you need those cards to not get into toilet, get out of the toilet. So after 5:30, since last 17 minutes, if you get in, you will be locked in. There's some experienced people here, probably. Medat, I'm looking at you. So bad side of being friend with me, I name call you in meetup. So yeah, please take one of the cards, and when you get out, use the card and bring it back, please. But don't take it with you anywhere. In case of emergency, we're gonna follow very similar path, but it will be best to follow Ricky or DSR or Nick. They are working here, so they know better than us. I should have one more. Wait, what's happening? Technical difficulties.
Yes, come on.
Yeah. MacBooks. Because of that, we need Arch Linux. You guys. So if in case of emergency, we need to meet next to Sofitel. Yeah, just follow them. Yeah, for some reason my computer does this to me. Thanks, Apple. Microsoft is the host today. What's it called? Like sponsor for the venue, and Arinco is where I'm working. Is sponsor for the pizza, and they are sponsoring. Yes, pizza is really important. They are sponsoring this meetup, Azure meetup, and some sort of other bunch of meetups as well. And also we are hiring for roles and stuff. So if you guys know anyone, or if you guys are experienced with data, and we are also looking for, I think, sales executive as well. So come talk to me if you guys know anyone, or So something important about the name tags here. Please leave them into the bin when you are done with them.
Rubbish bin.
Not the rubbish bin. There's a basket there. Sorry. Yeah, not the rubbish bin.
Leave them in the reception.
But you will need a QR code to get out, as you need it to get in. So there is also a bunch of QR codes there. Otherwise, there will be someone to give you some QR codes, or take a picture of this QR code and use that one. Otherwise, you can't get out. Please do not press emergency exit buttons unless there's an emergency. So there were a couple of QR codes there, but you guys can reach to me from Meetup or LinkedIn if you are interested in doing a talk, or if you guys have any feedbacks, or any topic idea that have someone. It's kind of frozen. It's grayed out. So, and my F keys don't work. Yeah, because my phone is in my pocket. Yeah. So Big applause to Tyler. And yeah, I couldn't show your picture again. Sorry, there's your picture. So
You can see the real title.
MacBook. I could present from here. Let's do it again. Yeah. I think we can set up your computer and stand here. I can come up. I mean, you're gonna move. You can put it in your pocket or wherever you want.
Okay.
USB-C or HDMI.
USB-C. Let's see if this works.
There. Okay, can you guys hear me? Cool. Okay, so yeah, as they said, my name is Taylor Southwick. I work at Microsoft. I am on the core AI team, and we focus a lot on my team on customer engagements and trying to meet customers where they're at, figuring out what challenges they have. The main space that I've been focused on since like the pre-releases I've done at core is ASP.NET Framework to core migrations. I've been through most of that journey with a lot of different customers and seeing kind of the challenges along the way. So the focus of this talk tonight is going to be just kind of what does that look like at this point? What are some of the challenges you might hit? What are the things you might want to be aware of? So before we get started, who here is on ASP.NET Core at this point? Okay, good. Who's still on ASP.NET Framework? Okay, yeah, quite a bit. So the thing I kind of want to talk about were the challenges and the approaches that we tend to take. Let's see if this can stay there. So like some of the big challenges people hit are old libraries, things that like you may not even know where you got them from. And like what version do you have? You may have loose binaries in your repo. What do you do with that? There's incompatible patterns. Things have changed since you probably wrote that app or someone else wrote that app years ago, where maybe you have a bunch of app domains, you have a bunch of just technologies that you wouldn't do it that way anymore. And then you have the project file changes. You got to change from the old style CS proj to the new one. These things are disruptive. They can be challenging. The packages config to package reference. In large projects, that becomes a bit of a challenge to kind of detangle all of that. And then there's all the tooling changes. And there's more issues, but these are some of the big ones that people first start hitting. So I kind of want to put this up here just so we can get some terminology as I talk about some of the approaches. But often when we are talking about a solution that you might have, we talk about it in terms of graphs. You see you have like the ASP.NET head project. This is your entry point. This is where your actual ASP.NET stuff is. And then you have dependent libraries, project references. These could be dependencies through NuGet, just like different projects, assemblies, that kind of stuff. But you have this graph. And one of the key things when doing migrations is trying to break up your migration in sizes that you can actually reason about. That when you create a PR for it, it's going to not be held up because it's too big. And so getting used to looking at your project structure and working your way up from the leaf nodes to the head project is part of what can make that a lot simpler. If you start at the end and work your way up, you can deal with issues in much smaller chunks. So how do you do that? So this is small. I wasn't sure how big this would be. Let me see if I can. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, so what this is kind of the workflow that we think about of how you want to approach the migration. And so there's a few parts in here where you get information. That's the green one at the beginning. And then you have some places where you do different planning of different levels of specificity. So that's the blue ones. And then the yellow ones are some of the tasks you have to do. So I'm going to kind of walk through this of how, like the process that you would go through. So the first thing is you need to know what's in your project. we see most people when they are trying to do it, they don't actually know what's in their solution. These solutions can be a lot bigger than what any one person's ever worked on. You work on for over the years. It's something that no one person knows, but you got to do some analysis up front. Currently, the best way we have to get that analysis is through the App Mod Copilot. What are we calling it now? GitHub Copilot App Modernization for .NET. We're awesome at naming. This is not to be confused with GitHub Copilot, various other forms of modernization. There's a lot of tools with similar naming, but the App Mod for .NET right now provides an analysis that can break down some of the big API usage that you have, some of the packages that you're using that you need to update. So once you have that information, then you can actually plan what that migration will look like. The way to plan that is to break it into these chunks. So we have the first step in a migration is you got to get to that SDK style project. That's going to be the most important thing you do, and it's going to probably be one of the bigger changes you do. For those of you who are still on ASP.NET Framework, how many of you are on SDK style projects? Have you started making progress towards that? Some of you? Yeah. It can be disruptive. It can change some of the tooling you have to use and how things work, but it is kind of the first step you have to do to be able to take advantage of being able to start multi-targeting, being able to move to .NET 10 and having that actually build. So once you get the SDK style, then you get to packages. You want to look at your packages on the solution scale. Don't look at it on a per project basis. And yes, our tooling right now around modernization will do that, and it doesn't work. You need to look at package management at a solution level. And so if you can identify those packages that are out of date, those that you know aren't supported anymore, come up with a plan. Figure out what you're going to do with that and start addressing that. One of the challenges that we see is sometimes you might be on really old versions. Like recently, one of the customers we were working with, they're on Artifact 3, and the newest version is like Artifact 10. But I think Artifact 4, maybe 5 is the one that's added support for .NET Core. You don't need to go all the way to the latest version if it's going to be too much work. So that's something with your own risk tolerance of how you want to do your upgrade. Identify that version, but you only need to go to the one that is that supports .NET Core. And one of the keys in the migration is trying to keep those changes as simple as possible, because it gets a lot easier to make some of these bigger changes you want to do once you get on Core. And so the more you can do small changes just to get there, then you can deal with tech debt a lot easier. So go through all your packages, figure out the ones you need to update and the ones you don't. And then you get to the place where you need to start multi-targeting, dealing with some of the old APIs. And this is where that graph that I showed is important, where you look at starting at one of these projects at the very end, you start this process that, oh, where did that zoomed out way too much. Let's try that again. Okay, so for each of the projects, you want to look at identifying the API patterns that you need to change while you're still on framework. Staging those, getting those validated, whatever that process looks like for you, so you feel comfortable about the change you've done. If you can identify some of those APIs and patterns you need to adjust while still on the framework side, then that switch to core won't seem like a big change. Like I'll go over some of those examples on the next slide. Once you identify and deal with those patterns, then you can multi-target, which at that point will be as simple as just appending .NET 10 to the end of the target frameworks. And then you might come across more APIs that you need to adjust to because you've now targeted .NET 10. One of the things we're seeing a lot when you do that is you get more warnings. There's more APIs available. You might get warnings that tell you should do certain things. You can decide how you want to handle that. You can turn them off. You can deal with them. But the goal is to try to get it so that one library is done. And then committed, you can validate that, and you can move on to the next one in that graph that you have of all your projects. The challenge, of course, after you've gotten through all of these projects, is then you get to your web app. And that, of course, is going to be a much larger change. But if you've taken care of all of your other technical debt before that, you've now got your APIs available. You've got the ability to actually use your business logic in core. And so generally, we recommend that you set up a new ASP.NET Core application, and you start moving things over in an incremental way, so you can move it over, test it some, get it committed, and then you can move on. This is something that takes a while to do. It's something that you have to probably build out new CI/CD stuff. You'll have to build out new testing harnesses potentially. But by breaking it into these chunks where you start slowly adding like a new route, moving a route over, testing it, you can get some comfort and feel confident that things are working, that you'll be able to actually deploy at some point. And a lot of the challenges with this is getting that momentum. It's getting some confidence that what you're doing is going to work. And so by following kind of the structured approach, it gets you towards that. You'll see over on the end there, that small little one on the far right, it says deferred work, review, and final validation. That's a bucket of things that you don't need to do for core. Things like Entity Framework. You don't need to go to ASP.NET Core. You don't need to go to Entity Framework Core to get to ASP.NET Core. You can stay on EF6 for a while, and then afterward you migrate to Core. So there's a bunch of things like that where people kind of get them all mixed together of what you need to do. But you don't, if you separate those out, you can focus on getting to .NET Core and then taking care of some of these other things that you want to migrate to. Oops. Yeah. So what are some of those things that you have to do at different points in that migration of before, during, after multi-targeting? So there's before the multi-targeting, you definitely want to upgrade your packages. You want to get your SDK project conversion. I highly recommend moving towards the Microsoft.extensions libraries. You can integrate that in to your ASP.NET Framework app, and I'll show you some new stuff that I've recently put into the system web adapters that makes that a lot easier. But that way you can start using some of these new patterns and features that just simplify a lot of things and can potentially make the migration easier as you incorporate them. You have to figure out what you're going to do with a binary formatter. We've got some great documentation that will explain patterns on how to do that. A big thing to pay attention to there is this something you just have to read, or do you have public APIs that people are sending this to? That's going to affect how you migrate that. But that's something you need to decide before you multi-target, because that is not available starting with .NET 8 or something. There's ways around that, but we don't recommend it, and it would be better to start really thinking about how you're going to migrate that. Identity management. We have Identity Core with ASP.NET Core. There's some stuff that you got to figure out what to do there. If you move to some sort of thing like Entra or some other externalized identity store, that can simplify the process a lot. If you want to continue using identity, there's some patterns there that can help, but you got to kind of think about what you're going to do there, especially if you're using membership or some of the older stuff. Look at if you're using web request. And if you're using that, start migrating to HTTP client. There's weirdness around there when you migrate. Web request on .NET Framework is implemented by HTTP client. No, HTTP client is implemented by web request on .NET Framework. On .NET Core, HTTP client web request is implemented through HTTP client, so it reversed. And so HTTP client is the future one that if you can get there, you'll be able to have a lot more success with migration. If you're using any sort of distribution mechanism for JavaScript with NuGet, you want to find your package management of choice for JavaScript and move away from that. Like if you're using Script Manager or things like that in ASP.NET Framework, that doesn't exist anymore. And NuGet got out of the business of JavaScript deployment stuff. Like go to Webpack, go to whatever is like I don't stay on top of the new stuff for that. So whatever is the newest thing or the best thing there that you like, or if you're already using something, start moving your JavaScript CSS to that. And then start replacing anything you're referencing directly system.web.dll with the system web adapters. That will allow you to compile against .NET Standard, .NET Core, and then you won't have to migrate off that yet. And then while you're multi-targeting, that's a good time to deal with app domains and getting some assembly load context equivalent working. And you can do this with like if-defing it, so you can have both of them working at the same time. But this is kind of the time when you want to start working on that, because app domains work on framework, not on core, and assembly load context is only on core. And you're going to probably find others. These are just some representative ones that we've seen quite a bit. After you remove .NET Framework, that's when you really need to move you off of like an HTTP handler, HTTP module to middleware. Some of you may be confused a little bit by that, but the system web adapters provides an emulation layer, so you can use those on ASP.NET Core for the migration. So it's something that you can wait to migrate off of those until you're on core, and then you can use ASP.NET Core isms themselves. If you're using system web adapters, get off of them at this point. Like, you don't need them. Use ASP.NET Core directly. At this point, if you want to do EF6 to EF Core, go for it. Like, you'll be on core, you can migrate, and EF Core is much more performant. It has a lot more capability than EF6. This is a great point if you want to move from Newtonsoft to system.text.json. You don't have to. A lot of these, there's choice if you want to do it. We've just heard people say that some of these things you have to do before you migrate. You don't. And then if you're using COM, you can move to COM wrappers. There's a lot of new things in .NET Core that you can take advantage of, or modern .NET. We keep changing the name. But there's like having an idea of what technology you're dealing with and when it fits into that migration is an important part of your planning and how you approach the migration. So I was mentioning system web adapters. How many of you are familiar with that? Not many. Okay. So this is something that I built a couple years ago after meeting with a bunch of customers, finding out that they had a lot of usage of HTTP context, HTTP request, HTTP response, and those kinds of primitives from system.web in their business logic, deep down in their stack. And that becomes really difficult to migrate if you've got 100 projects and they're all using HTTP context somewhere. If you're using HTTP context at current, like migrating off that. So what this does is it implemented a bunch of those APIs against the ASP.NET Core APIs. So you can continue to target and compile against system.web, but have access to actually running on ASP.NET Core with them. It goes back and forth between the two transparently with implicit conversions. You can cast them to each other. It does it with a bunch of caching. It targets Net 4.5 plus and Net Standard. And when you're running on framework, you're not seeing any performance penalty. It just type unifies to the stuff in system.web. It's all mostly pass-through, so you can go between the two representations as much as you want, depending on what layer of migration you're at. You only configure with a small amount of code on ASP.NET Core. Otherwise, it just works. But there's a lot of ability to extend it in however you want. So I'll show some examples of this and how to integrate it in with some ASP.NET Framework. So a lot of what I've said is an approach of generalized pattern called the Strangler Fig. And this is an important way of thinking about migration, that it's based off of this. I think it might be from this part of the world. I'm not sure. It's the Strangler Fig tree. But the idea of it is that there's this vine that grows around the tree and starts absorbing the tree. And then after a while, the tree's gone, but the vine's still there. And so it kind of replaces it. And so the idea in technology is often used, the Strangler Fig pattern, as a way to take an existing application and slowly change it to the point where it's something new. If you're familiar with like the boat of Theseus, it's the same kind of thing. So with the Strangler Fig pattern on ASP.NET Core, you're going to start off with your ASP.NET Framework, like how you normally have it. And then you're going to start you're going to like create some sort of ASP.NET Core application in front of your framework. And whether or not you do this exactly like this doesn't matter. It's just an idea of how you can approach it, where we have techniques where you can have your ASP.NET Core app proxy things back to your framework app. So as you bring stuff online into your ASP.NET Core app, you can start running it in production and testing things. A/B testing it. You can have some flexibility to try things out on the ASP.NET Core side early on. We can use the system web adapters to make that migration a little bit easier. And then over time, you move more and more of the functionality from the framework to core. We've seen both people doing it where they use the proxy, but other people like this too complicated. We're just going to follow the same pattern, but just have the ASP.NET Core something we keep testing internally until we're ready to do it. Whatever you feel comfortable with, but the key is that doing it in an incremental way where over time, more and more of the stuff goes into the ASP.NET Core side, till at some point you can remove the framework, just have core. And then you get rid of the system web adapters and you're just on pure .ASP.NET Core and life is great. Yeah, ta-da. I wish it was that easy, huh? Yeah, so that's kind of like the overview of stuff. I have a few demos to show this in action. Yeah, I can put that back up if you want to grab a picture of it. Any questions at this point before I like demo it, or if there's anything specific you'd like to see a demo of, I can. Sorry.
This one's online.
There we go. Oh, some of these are actually out of date. This one I don't think it's been updated for a bit, because now we're GitHub Copilot modernization, not .NET Upgrade Assistant.
And we have one question from online, which is, can system web adapters be used to replace system.web.mvc?
No. So the system web adapters is a subset of the system.web set of libraries and such. It's mostly geared around the stuff that you would find in business logic. The stuff that is more of the presentation layer. So unfortunately, web forms, MVC, that stuff is not included. But more and more stuff from just the general things people used in system.web without realizing it have been brought in. But yeah, MVC is not included in that. Thankfully, though, Copilot is pretty good about doing a translation from MVC to ASP.NET Core MVC. Same with Web API. It's pretty good at that. Yeah, so let me pull up my example. So while this is connecting to my dev box, I've got a bunch of samples I'm going to show from, it's the System Web Adapters repo. So you guys can access it. It's online on GitHub. And so once it pulls up, we can take a look at what they are. And if there's any specific topic that sounds interesting, like let me know and we can start with that. So the samples follow the areas of configuration, some things that can help with configuration, things that can help with dependency injection. And this is all on framework, on ASP.NET Framework. Forms auth, identity. Oh, the auth windows is not a thing. That doesn't actually work.
Change the resolution.
Unfortunately, this part of Visual Studio is not something you can.
Resolution of the screen.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. That's a good point. That means I have to reconnect to my dev box, but give me a sec. Yeah, I'll just scale it up bigger.
Scale of the box. Yeah.
Is that too much or?
That's good.
Is that good? Okay.
Ready.
Okay, so now I'll reconnect to my dev box.
For the video.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the call out there. I always forget to change that scale when presenting.
Struggle to find your way around
now. Yeah.
It's time to start using the second screen.
Oh, yeah.
Lovely.
There we go. Okay. Now everything is really big.
Not big enough for the code window now.
Not cool. Where's the code window? Where did that go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me undo this. So were any of the areas that I mentioned ones that you guys would be particularly interested in? Otherwise, I'll just pick one and we can start with that. Okay, so one of the ones I want to show off is something that is new as of December. And what it does is it's something that helps with using all of the generic hosting stuff from ASP.NET Core. Are you guys familiar with generic hosting? Yeah, so it's think of all of the dependency injection, the configuration, the options, like all of that stuff. It was pioneered in ASP.NET Core, but now it's generalized so you can use it in any application. But we notably never implemented it for any system web stuff. Like people never wanted to touch that. And so I set that up so that you can use generic hosting model within an ASP.NET Framework application. And so you see here, it follows a similar pattern to what you have in ASP.NET Core. And one of the benefits of this is if you start using this kind of pattern here, as you turn on ASP.NET Core, it will just work. It won't be something you have to change any patterns. It can allow you to start using the newer patterns now. By doing this, it will set up, it will connect to app settings if you have that, app settings.json. You can use, it'll also take anything you have in your web config and stick that into your iConfiguration. So you can integrate that all together. It sets up dependency injection. So if you're unaware, ASP.NET Framework did add some dependency injection out of the box. It's a little weird to use, but this takes care of some of the weirdness of it. So you can use it in web forms pages for constructor injection. You can use it in MVC and Web API. And so this will set up this method here. It source generates a bunch of connectors for you that will connect all those things up for you if you have them in your project. If you have MVC, it will set the dependency injection thing for MVC. But it's all going to go to the same dependency container. So if you call that, it will opt in and hook that up for you. You can use background services. You can get scope, transient stuff. But just by doing this, you can start taking advantage of that. Who here has used Aspire? Okay, a few people, not many. This enables you to easily hook up Aspire. You see this add service defaults? That's Aspire. It goes to a shared Aspire component that comes from the template. And with a few changes, pretty much all of it can support Framework as well. So if I were to launch this, I'm going to launch it through an Aspire host. And this is a Framework application. Size of this is making it hard to find. Where do I set the? I am not seeing. Oh, why is it not letting me set the startup?
It's somehow running.
Oh, it is running. You're right. I started one earlier because I was wanting it to set up Aspire and download the containers. Good call. Okay, so now I can set it. Set a startup. There we go. Okay, so now if we launch this, have you all seen Aspire and do you know what it is? Okay, smattering of both. Oh yeah, you said you did one a week or two ago.
I've done like one session in the last 6 months. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah. In a nutshell, it's mostly development time, can kind of be deployment time, but the general idea of it is it allows you to set up an orchestrated environment of containers and external services that can all work together and kind of just light up functionality in your application. So this one is not super interesting because it's purely just the one application. But what this gives you is logs. It gives you metrics. It gives you visibility into your application, a lot of the observability stuff. But this application, I actually don't remember what endpoints I had on it. But it did something. And if we go to the structured logs, we'll see that we got some logs here. But it's hooked up with Aspire, and it can start getting some traces. This was not an interesting one to show that actually, but there's some Aspire components for the system web adapters to help connect them up. And so I've updated the documentation for this. If you go online to MS Learn around ASP.NET migrations, there's a thing there on how to get this connected. Let's see, an interesting one to show would be some identity related stuff. So there's a lot of different ways you might want to migrate identity. Let me get this started. So one of the things that System Web Adapters provides is the ability to set up this kind of small microservice migration pathway where you have your new core application, you got your framework in the background. And you can have that framework as your source of truth for authentication. So if you have some custom authentication that's difficult to migrate, you can set that one up to be like the source of truth, and the core app can use that to authenticate. And then you can run stuff in core knowing who it is. But that can be a problem at times, and so it's not useful for the full migration. So what this shows is the ability to have one identity server here. So you see that this is a MS SQL container. It's running, and Aspire's hooking it up to 3 applications. One is a framework application that if we go over to it, we can create a new user. ASP.NET Framework always takes a while to do some of the things. There we go. Okay, let me create a new user. Oh, you have to put a okay. Just a sec. Yeah, exactly. Let's see if I did that correctly this time. Taking longer. There. So, okay. Nothing special. You've seen that before. It's ASP.NET Framework. We're logged in. Cool. Let me pull up this core version of it. So what this is, it's the ASP.NET core version of it connecting to the framework application on a back channel to authenticate with the same cookie. And I'm logged in here in the ASP.NET core side. So when you're migrating, at some point, you're like, I don't want to have that framework thing in the background. And you might want to start using, you might want to be like, I'm using Owen authentication with cookies. Let me just use that in core. And so that's what this one's doing. It's Owen on ASP.NET Core doing all of the authentication. How many of you knew that ASP.NET Core supports Owen and has the entire time it's been out? However, there's some weirdness you got to do to connect them that was never implemented. So there's System Web Adapters now has a package that helps with that. It was an open issue for a long time. And then there's one more mode, and this one's more of an experiment I've been doing to explore it. But this one is doing the same thing. You see I'm logged in over here, but it's using identity core, but using an EF6 backend. So instead of the Entity Framework core backend, it's using EF6. So it's all using the same database, but authenticating through different ways. And each of these are kind of a different point on the migration process if you're using identity. Depending on what you're using, you might have a whole different pathway you need. But this way, you can slowly go from being on framework to kind of a dual setup where you're using that framework as the source, then you're sharing the database with Owen, then you get rid of Owen, you're on EF6, and then at some point you can migrate to using EF core, which that has a bit of some challenge because you got to deal with the new schema with Identity Core. But it allows you to have some stepping stones. So at this point, you can have all the code working, and then you can deal with the database change you got to do later. Okay. So let's see. Oh, another interesting one to show would be app configuration. So this connects, as I mentioned, if you get to using the hosted application, you're using the generic host, it allows you to have a setup where you can, oh, where did the code go? Code lens. I keep way too many tabs open. There we go. Okay. So we've got, I guess that's not going to show it there. This just sets it up in the background, but then in a shared library somewhere, you can access a shared set of configuration. Sorry, this resolution is making it tricky for me to connect. There we go. So config info, is this it? Yeah. So there's an API in System Web Adapters that can be a drop-in replacement for Configuration Manager. Because one of the challenges with migrating configuration is that you're using a static call to it, but ASP.NET Core is very much against any sort of static calls. But getting migrated fully to using configuration in a non-static way is very non-trivial. But this allows you to get to the point where now this app configuration.getSetting or get connection string, it's going to pull from web config if you have it there, or it will just go through the rest of any sort of configuration source you have of the modern stack of app settings, of user connections, of environment variables, of key vault, or whatever you want to connect with it. But this API will allow you to start accessing those anywhere in your application that you're referencing System Web Adapters. It will also work on both framework and core. So this is something that you can migrate off of after you get to core, and you can get more proper DI, like I options, or some way of getting it in without a static access method. But this is one of those things that can be very problematic and troubling to figure out, how do I migrate that? How can I change that? Because it's deceptively simple. It's kind of like a lot of the app domain stuff where the APIs are there, but it will not function quite how you expect it to when you get onto core. And you may have a hard time tracking some of it down. So this is a place where Copilot can be really helpful to be like, hey, find any usage of Configuration Manager with get settings or get connection string, replace it with this. And it can usually go find them all and update it for you. And so getting that can really help with some of the migration. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Is this repo going to be available on the GitHub links you shared?
On the what?
This repo, is it one of the GitHub links that you shared?
Yeah, this is the System Web Adapters repo. Yeah, it's on github/.net/System Web Adapters.
Thanks.
Yep. I try to pay attention to the issues there every week or so. So if you have any issues, just post it there. The goal of this repo has kind of become just a collection of runtime helpers for things that are problematic during migration. And so as we find issues, I set the Owen one up last summer as we were working through a bunch of people that had Owen stuff. And so as we find more things, we'll do that. The dependency injection stuff is new. One of the internal Azure services, the portal, just has been using it as well and been doing great with it. So it's one of those things that it's different parts of the project will be used in different areas. And it depends what are the challenges you personally are having with migration. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, this is an area that can be problematic. If you use machine key or any sort of like data protection kind of stuff using machine key, because out of the box, that's not going to be something you can easily migrate. And so you need to configure your application to be able to do the same encryption on both framework and core. This has also been supported for years, but it's been very tricky to get set up. And it's something that there's a small doc, like a small part of one doc that had it that I think a lot of people missed. So this, again, kind of like with app configuration, it's something to help if you need that. But on the framework, if you're using the generic host, a lot of these features in System Web Adapters at this point require you to migrate to using the hosting pattern here so that it can get things configured right. But you see that it has an add data protection, and this will configure it. It compiles, it looks to compile the same as you would on ASP.NET Core, but it's a different implementation specifically to connect it in ASP.NET Core. There's a few gotchas around data protection if you're using it in like cookies. You have to make sure that you're using the same you're persisting the keys to the file system or some persistent place, that you can use the same keys on your core application. You also have to set the application name to be the same. And if you set those two things, if you have those two things configured, you can get an iData protection provider that will allow you to encrypt and decrypt or protect and unprotect data across both platforms. If you're using it for cookies, like an ON cookie or something, and you want to be able to read it, there's a helper method. Let me find where that is. Identity, there we go. And then here. So this is a kind of a complicated setup because I've got 3 different versions all kind of interleaved depending on the configuration. But you see here that there's a shared application name to be able to connect the data protection. But then here you have to change the cookie name to ASP.NET application cookie. And then there's also a change you got to do on the framework side to tell Owen to use data protection. It's all documented on MS Learn. There's a page that talks about setting this up. But once you get that set up, then you can read the cookie on both sides of your framework and core apps. And so that helps with one of those challenges of when you're migrating, you're going to probably have to have a point at which everything gets invalidated. And you'll have to have some, depending what you're trying to protect and unprotect, you may have to figure out how to handle like the stuff that's persistent and you need to be able to read. But once you change to use this data protection layer on your framework side, then you won't ever need to invalidate anything on the core side. Yeah, it can simplify a lot of it, but there's going to be a step at which when you switch from the built-in machine key to the data protection from ASP.NET Core, that there's going to be, you won't be able to read anything. So if you need to do that, you're going to have to come up with some pattern to like an anti-corruption layer of some sort. Okay, let's see. Another thing that this can enable is session, being able to use ASP.NET Core Session. How many of you use ASP.NET Core Session in your applications? I mean, not ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET Framework Session, like HTTP context.session. You guys use that? Some? Okay, some people do. If you're not, that's great. Session has issues if you're using it for too much stuff, but it's something that a lot of old applications end up doing. And so kind of like the authentication, this provides a way to set up a kind of a client-server relationship where the framework holds that session. One of the challenges with migrating anything that's using session is that you have a vastly different set of APIs for dealing with session on ASP.NET Framework and Core. ASP.NET Framework was strongly typed to a degree, I guess. You get objects that you could cast. It was binary serialized. You could deal with it as objects. On Core, it's just a byte array. You don't get to do anything. Like you have to have a layer on top of it. And so what this does is it implements a way to configure a set of session keys that you can define if you define what the type is, then we can serialize and deserialize it. And that's one of the main differences. If you want to do it on Core, you got to be aware of what the type is, or at least be able to figure it out. You can hook into that aspect of it and customize the serialization, deserialization. So if you have some way of identifying what it is. But this will set up, so here's calling it where it's setting up session values, and you see that it's increasing the core count. Let me call the framework side. And it's getting proxied through. And so you'll see that it's going to now have a framework count, but it has the core count. And part of it, you'll see that the value for the framework is increasing while the core is not. And so if you come back here, you'll have the core count. This is actually a bug I've been meaning to fix, where if you don't specify a value, I don't specify the framework count on the core side, and so it's erasing it. It doesn't show it. But now the core count's updating. But this allows you to use some of those APIs you might be using and get to core, and then you can figure out a better way to handle it. Because again, the main thing when migrating is to consider what are the smallest chunks you can do, so that when you create a PR, people aren't going to be like, this is too big. What are you even thinking? Like, you want to think of it like, keep them small, keep them something so people are like, oh yeah, that's an obvious change. Let's do it. And then you can build that momentum. And the more you do that, the faster you'll be able to get through the migration. So that kind of covers the examples I had. I'm happy to take any questions you guys have. Yeah.
Any guidance for the migration from identity to identity core on EF6 to EF core?
Yeah, so that's actually an area I've been exploring the last few months. So I showed that right now, one of the ways we're thinking, if you really want to incrementalize it, would be if you're using, are you using it on Owen, like with Owen pipeline?
We ended up writing some custom SQL migration. That
Okay.
I don't know, in the context we had to specify the table name.
Yep.
And then the migration was dealing with the normalized username.
Yeah. So that is going to be part of the process if you're going to switch to using Identity Core out of the box with EF Core. We're trying to think of what are ways to make that simpler, because that's kind of a big change you got to do all at once if you're going to do that way. And so right now we're trying to see if we can get it so that you can first get to core using Owen and using identity framework, and then get off of Owen and using identity core, but using EF6 and still not changing the database. And then seeing if we can come up with a way to make it easy to use EF core with the existing database, or something that's that custom SQL thing you came up with. See if there's some way that we can make that so it's not has to be custom for everyone. It's an exploration I've been doing for the last few months, trying to figure that out. So I'd be interested to hear more about your experience. So I'll get your info and we can chat a bit later, because it is one of those areas that honestly a lot of folks on the .NET team aren't familiar enough with some of those challenges. And so we've been trying to understand more of how much of a bottleneck is that? How big of a change does that feel like? And how comfortable are people with doing some of those things? And so figuring out where those chunks are is tricky, but it's something I'm thinking about right now. So, yeah.
To add to that, we also migrated from .NET Framework to .NET Core, and we thought we had to do EF6 to EF Core.
Yes.
And yeah, we had a lot of issues with it as well.
Yes, that's really problematic, because then you get stuck on Entity Framework Core 3.1 or something, or 2, something old. Yeah, I noticed the docs still had that a year ago, so I made sure to get that updated. But even on the .NET team, people are like, oh, that's supported? Like, it's one of those things that there's a lot of old information. And if you're using Copilot or any of the LLMs for any help here, keep in mind that a lot of the information they have is going to be out of date. A lot of the stuff is from Stack Overflow, which is not going to be great information at this point. And a lot of it's based off of like really early versions of .NET. If you're using any Copilot or any LLM, set up the MSLearn MCP server and make sure that that's part of your agent.md or your whatever your instructions you're using. So that way it can always validate and ground itself in the current knowledge. I've been working hard to keep at least the migration set of documentation up to date for the past year or two, so that it will work for that. I am noticing also that the latest models are much more aware of some of these things, that they must be using some of these newer docs finally. But just be aware that there's a lot of bad information out there, because a lot of people get stuck trying to do an EF6 to EF core migration. I mean, I even found out this week that you can use Microsoft.data.SQL client on EF6 if you're on 6.5. Like, it's just not well documented and publicized. But if you need to move to Microsoft.data.SQL client, like you're going to Azure or somewhere else where you need some of the new authentication schemes it provides, or just the security aspects of it, you can integrate that in with EF6 on Framework. You don't need to wait until you're on EF Core. So like a lot of these things, there are ways of moving forward with it earlier than later without having to like rewrite the whole world at one time.
I would like to add something from my experience. When you do the SDK style, your migration to SDK style, it's very recommended to do also the migration to central package management.
Yes.
Because you have to deal sometimes with multiple versions of the same library across the assemblies. By doing the migration to central package management, you can upgrade all these libraries to a very specific version.
Yes.
This will help you with transitive dependencies and save you a lot of time.
Yes. I don't know if the people online heard, but his comment was around migrating to central package version while you're doing that, like after you do the SDK conversion. And it really does help because I don't know how many of you have seen this, but I've seen it quite often where as you're doing the migration, you realize you've hard-coded weird versions of things that it's like you have to reconcile it, and the central package version management really helps keep that in check. So you have one place to manage all of the versions. Yeah, and also trying to keep them pruned so you don't have excess packages you don't need. The tooling sometimes helps with that, sometimes doesn't, but minimizing any packages that you don't need can help with some of that as well. But yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
As part of your role, you actually update MS Learn, and when you find a new, so you're the
I do. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things. A lot of people are like, "I'll let a doc writer do that. I'll log a bug," but they never get to it. So, and like you are all welcome. If you see issues on MS Learn, you can submit PRs for it. They're pretty quick about responding to it. They're not good about creating them themselves. So yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just get a PR. But yeah, it's been one of my goals the past year to make sure the documentation is somewhat useful. Yeah.
There's questions from online.
Yeah.
We've got a YARP migration question that needs some written context to explain properly any unexpected traffic endpoints we've already migrated and want to understand the right pattern to resolve it. Would it be okay to send you an email after?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah, feel free to email me if you have any questions. Did you post it somewhere, or it's TASOU@Microsoft? But feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Question from Rory. If ASP.NET Core can use Owen, are there any MSAL library changes, or do you have to switch to Microsoft.identity.web?
I am not certain about that. I haven't looked into that space for a while. I'm not sure what the current state of the identity libraries are in general. That's always confused me. So, but there have been no changes to any of the Owen stuff. Like there's no new features going to Owen. Supporting Owen was something that was initially done way back when ASP.NET Core started. Like they implemented the stuff for it. But there's no real changes to any of the libraries besides basic security stuff. And this probably would fall under some of that basic security stuff. I'm not certain. If you send me an email with it, I can follow up on it though. So whoever sent that, just send that out to me.
Is our local security identity guy.
Yeah.
Started .NET, Marshall.
Particularly other organizer.
Oh, cool. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Questions?
Explain that YARP, was it?
Yeah, I know I went through a lot of stuff. I wasn't exactly sure how much everyone knew of things. What YARP is we're great at naming. It's yet another reverse proxy. And so it was initially built as we were trying to like move away from using Nginx and stuff in .NET, I think. but it's essentially a reverse proxy that you can just put in your ASP.NET Core pipeline. Actually, I don't know why I'm showing it here. Let me show up the code where you use it. But you can it has a lot of configurability, but it's essentially you can, in the context of migration, the way that it's helpful is that you can configure it like you would any other route where it gets priority. And so you can give it the least amount of priority. So if a route exists in your ASP.NET Core app, it gets serviced by ASP.NET Core. But if it's not available in ASP.NET Core, then YARP will just send it on to your ASP.NET Framework application, and then it will return back. And so that way, as you migrate stuff over, you can start enabling some of the routes, and it will become the source of truth for it. And it has there's a lot of documentation on it. I believe it's used in App Service. It's used in a lot of the big products in Azure. Like it's being well tested. So when people have used this pattern of YARP to set up the connection, a lot of customers I've worked with that have done it are doing it on their IIS boxes, and they're doing it on the same box, and the latency they see is negligible. They're like, it's maybe adding like 4 milliseconds to any call. Like their database call is taking way more. And so it was something they were like, this is fine as a migration step. Because you want to think of a lot of these things that may seem like a little bit more effort, or like, oh, that seems like a weird pattern, that a lot of it is just they're stepping stones to get you there.
You mentioned using ASP.NET as your source of truth for the auth.
Yes.
And during the migration.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit in with the YARP thing?
So it's a separate thing, but related.
Do sort of your YARP thing as a full proxy, and then you do an extra microservice, so you're doing an extra call.
Yeah, it does like during the authentication step of the ASP.NET Core pipeline is when it will query out to the framework application and then come back and continue on. If you look at the docs, there's a comment about how to configure it correctly so that that does not happen if it's actually going to end up going to the framework application. You got to be aware of that. There's some guidance in the docs around that, because you don't want it going to the framework application, authenticating, coming back, and then just going back to doing the request again. But yeah, it just becomes another call it does. And depending how you've set up your application, it might do it with 1 or 2 calls. If you have SSL enabled on that connection, it can do HTTP2 and do a little bit more of a bidirectional thing for some of the stuff it needs to do. But that just happens transparently. You don't have to think about it.
Using YARP on Aspire.
What?
Are you using YARP in any of your app host projects?
Yeah. That this session one that I have up. If you see here, I've got this port 7146. That's the core application. This one /framework, it's going to the back end. It's going to the framework application. If we pull up the trace here, we will see that the core application and the framework application. And you can see that for these applications here, it may be a little confusing at first why it's doing this, but on the core application, it's hitting both. But on the framework application, it's just hitting the framework. And that's because it's on here, it's going and grabbing the session from the framework and then coming back. Similar to the authentication, where it does that as part of the request. Like if we were to pull up one of these, you'll see that here's the full post. In the Git, you'll see that there's this post here. This is the session that it's keeping it alive while we do the work on the core. For those of you who have worked with session on ASP.NET Framework, one of the things about it is that it locks it. And so we maintain that behavior when you're using it in this pattern where it follows those same semantics. And so it keeps the connection open to keep that session, and then it persists it at the end. This is one of the benefits of getting onto Aspire early is you can start seeing some of these connections you have in your application of the calls it's making and kind of what that looks like end to end. Any other questions?
online.
mentioned the static accesses being difficult or problem.
Yeah. Mhm.
What's the story with that? Easy to create a static accessor?
Yeah, so the challenge here is that there's a big philosophy difference between ASP.NET Core and Framework. Framework was built around app domains, and in app domains you could have static data, and that was fine. ASP.NET Core is built around more of a dependency injection where there's nothing static. If you're familiar with David Fowler, any conversation you ever have with him about static stuff, he's like, no, you can't do that. It took me a while to convince him that this project was helpful because it enabled a couple static methods like HTTP context.current. It's one of those things that it seems simple. A lot of people rely on it, but it becomes non-trivial to really access that in ASP.NET Core because it's just not a static thing. And so if you built your stuff around static stuff and you need to now start accessing it as like instance variables somehow, well, if you're not using dependency injection, it might work if you set up something like service locator pattern or something, but it becomes something where everyone has to create their own way of doing it. So that's why one of the things this project enables is HTTP context.current. And then I've recently added that app configuration one so that you could have something equivalent to configuration manager, but that allows you to start using some of the newer configuration sources.
So in your system.web adapters, there is a static method to get the HTTP context.
Yeah, you don't have to change anything. Like that's why one of the first steps you want to do is migrate. In your migration is even when you're targeting framework, get rid of any specific system.web.dll references. Like if you look in your project file, if you have a reference in the XML with system.web, get rid of that and reference the Microsoft.system web adapter or ASP.NET Core.system web adapters. And if you reference that and it compiles, you'll be fine. It will tell you, of course, oh, you're using something that's not enabled by the adapters, then you got to deal with that. And you could put system web back and try to work towards getting rid of whatever that is. Or if it seems like a general purpose one, feel free to log an issue or submit a PR to fix it. But yeah, it just provides a bunch of those like static things. It provides a lot of the API surface area that you would come to expect, but it's difficult to migrate at the beginning.
Because we use that heaps.
Huh?
We use that heaps, so that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, when I first started really diving in with customers and like what's challenging, it's like we couldn't even migrate the first project in a solution of 1,000 projects because they had system.web.http context.current all the way down there. And it's like, well, we're dead in the water. So this helps get past that. And of course, it's an onion. There's more issues that come up after that, but it at least unblocks that class of issues. Yeah. I mean, it'd be ideally, in the ideal world, you get more to dependency injection. And like the HTTP application host that I showed you allows you to start taking more advantage of that even in framework. And it's kind of becomes a multi-pronged approach where all of these techniques, you can kind of start figuring out what makes sense for your application to get you the most progress. Like there's no one size fits all, but some of them may help you move down that pathway. Anything else?
I think we're
Cool.
good.
Okay.
It looks so easy. So we should be done by next week, right? All those ASP.NET. All those ASP.NET.
I'm not gonna bother with the MacBook trying to reconnect again. So thank you for coming. Thanks, Taylor, for talking to us today. It was really great presentation. I normally would put the slides and say, please return the badges. And also there's QR codes there in front of the reception. Please take one or take a picture of this. Do not press the emergency button. What else? This is generally it, right? So, yeah.
See you next time.
See you next time. Yeah. If you guys are looking for any specific topic to present or interested in, so reach out to me through Meetup or add me on LinkedIn. It would be good to have LinkedIn link here or something. But yeah, anyway, there's another meetup next week, Azure meetup. What else do we have? Anything?
You guys should meet up. Don't forget, go come.
Yeah, that's kind of it.